there should be a live thing there. But okay, so only Chris Bullock, who is the editor on Centurion, is here right now. There's a few other people that hopefully will show up. For those of you, I don't think we have anyone actually. No, there's no one viewing right now, but I will do the prep for the podcast episode, the little intro later. Anyway, so Nefertiti Overdrive didn't fund. So the idea is I want to talk about some of the problems that may have occurred and then see where we want to take this thing, if I want to take it anywhere. And be honest, Chris, like how closely were you following the Kickstarter?
Yeah. I mean, I checked it quite often, I guess. I don't go on Kickstarter that often. Not, I mean, for number, I guess I've on several occasions told you my kind of likes and dislikes about Kickstarter. I
Yep.
think the biggest dislike being the fact that being in Canada, everything's so much more expensive. So that's like a big, I guess, turn off for me.
Yeah.
But I watched it. Yeah, probably every couple of days I looked at where you were at.
Okay. And just joining us is Josh Jordan, writer
Hey.
writer of Heroine, involved in Doll, writer of Doll, and involved in the Dangers Untold. All of them successful Kickstarters. So thanks, Josh. And hey, Todd's here too, the Warden, who successfully kickstarted Killshot, and is now working on a super uber secret project codenamed Phoenix.
Dun dun dun.
So basically,
Why haven't successfully kickstarted anything?
you're a part of Centurion.
Now I know where I stand here, right? That's
everyone that I invited here, I invited because I value your opinions and your ability to be constructively critical. So that's, and really for those who just joined, the idea I just want to kind of first go over where maybe the Kickstarter failed, and then where, like, what I can possibly do with this in the future. So yeah. And again, if you honestly didn't follow the Kickstarter closely, don't worry about it. If you went and popped in and had a look, whatever. But I would be interested to hear. I do have some things that I've harvested from both Google Plus and RPG.net. Comments, constructive criticism, and ideas that people have offered. But I would be very interested in hearing what everybody here thinks. Some of the failures, some of the things I could have done better on the Kickstarter. Josh, do you want to start?
Sure. First of all, to be a bit pedantic, can you hear me, by the way? I'm using a different setup. Okay. I feel weird because my wife took the good computer. To be a bit pedantic, to say that your project failed is a little bit more loaded than just to say that it didn't fund, because
Exactly.
it's like you didn't necessarily do anything wrong, because you haven't broken any promises if your Kickstarter does not fund. I mean, on the one hand, you could say that the fundraising failed, but not necessarily that the book failed. So it's like you went to work and didn't sell a car today. That's not exactly the same as being a complete and utter failure. That being, like, very broadly speaking, I don't think you did anything obviously wrong. My highest level critique is it doesn't seem like there was a market for that game at that budget. But there's definitely interest about the game. So the question is, like, all right, so do we tweak the budget, tweak the game, or somehow tweak the interest?
Absolutely.
I think we all have hopefully thoughts and opinions on that, but I just want to clarify and say, like, you can take kind of like some of the responsibility off your shoulders and say, like, you're not necessarily a terrible person for having a Kickstarter that didn't fund.
Well, I feel better about myself now.
Good.
But yeah, I would agree with that because I mean, personally speaking, as someone who has played the game and thoroughly enjoyed, like of all the games that you've run, the two that I have enjoyed the most like in order has been Nefertiti Overdrive and Kiss My Axe. And I think that's just because for me personally, there's been much more emphasis on action and narrative than there has been with the other two, where as someone who is an absolute failure at history, I'm so busy learning about stuff that has nothing to do with the game. It's like it's for me. I got so caught up into that part. So I don't know. I think it's more so just like it's not so much that the Kickstarter failed. It's more so like in marketing, this approach didn't work. It's not a problem with the product. I think the product is awesome. It's just to me, I think it might be more so about just how you marketed it didn't match the product itself. You know what I mean? Like I've been looking at it and kind of like with an armchair quarterback kind of viewpoint. And I'm kind of wondering if maybe some of it, like a lot of the graphics and everything that I'm seeing for it, everything's very stationary. Like the artwork that you have on here that Kieran's done, these are people standing still or lying down. Whereas this is a game where, and I kid you not, to anyone listening, that in one of our recent play tests, we had the princess who was driving a cart with, I guess, 2 or 4 horses, whatever, and I was in the back, like, kicking off people, and we found a way to actually get the cart while going 60 miles an hour straight through to stop and pull a 180 turn and then swing back. It's like the whole thing was very fluid, lots of action. And I'm wondering if that's something where it's just, that is maybe more the approach, that it needs to appear to be as action-packed as the game itself.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah.
And also joining us is Chris Groff. Those of you who listen to Accidental Survivors will know Chris. But he's been a rules editor since pretty much Sword Noir because of his mutant ability to break games.
Ooh.
So
Hey,
we're
Chris.
just talking about possible failure points on the Kickstarter, and thankfully I've been assured that I'm not a terrible person, that the Kickstarter itself didn't actually fail. The funding wasn't there.
You're terrible for others.
That's
Right.
a little bit different. So,
Yeah,
but anyways,
it's not a reflection on you or the product itself necessarily. It's just
the product at that point. kind of.
right. Yeah.
And I mean, any thoughts, Chris or Chris?
Well, I think part of it is that it's a very niche product, and your target audience is going to be people that have already backed some of your products.
And everything goes silent.
Can you hear me, or?
I can. Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you've got the market of people that have been following you, and that's going to be probably the core number there. I would think is probably diminishing, just in general, from Kickstarter to Kickstarter. You might have some people that were put off by the first one and not back the second one. The second one, you might gain a few new people, and it'll fluctuate. But I think that overall, it's probably going to diminish. Unfortunately, or at the very least, you might break even. But what were your numbers like? Have they been going up or were they going down?
Actually, I got as usual, there was a large number at the beginning, not as much as we got for Centurion, and then we did not get the push at the end. Got a very slight increase, but I mean, an increase over 2 a day is not anything to shout about. So, again, it didn't mimic Centurion's very strong U-shape curve, where there was huge people at the beginning and then a few at the end.
Yeah. I think the other thing is it was a cool idea, but it's different, and sometimes people don't get different. Like it's a mashup that you wouldn't normally put together.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So.
No, agreed, understood.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. In the indie scene, you don't want to have yet another, right? So you got to do something different. But I'm wondering if maybe just maybe it was too different for some people, or you know, they've already got your other games, so they know what the mechanics are like. And while this one was different, there's still like how many. And speaking as myself, I start to not just this Kickstarter, but just in general, like how many rule books do I need when I'm just getting really looking at a setting? You know what I mean?
Yep.
So you can do the setting. You don't necessarily need another book to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be the other part of the problem. And then I think the other sort of just general nature is Kickstarter itself. A lot of people are just kind of getting tired of Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed.
I mean, you've been delivering, basically, I'm going to say on time, not 100%, but compared to the general Kickstarter, you haven't failed to deliver. You've been on time. So I don't think it's any sort of like past performance issues. I think it's just sort of the overall. There's a certain level of saturation with Kickstarter projects and indie RPGs. I'm starting to wonder if maybe I don't know if they're on the decline, but I haven't noticed as much of a buzz about the new darlings, like the new indie scenes. They just don't seem to be buzzing as much the last 6 months to a year like they were, 2 years ago even.
Yep. Yeah, understood. I agree. Motherfucking Bullock, do you got anything to add?
Yeah, well, your first mistake, I guess, ultimately was you should have had me kind of front and center. You should have. I don't know, something that would have really, that could have really differed. But whatever, that was, you decided to go with you. No, but I guess actually there was a couple of things that when people were talking that reminded me. Then, and some of the points Chris made, I think were interesting because you have.
Could you turn up the pickup on your mic at all?
Yeah. Well, can you hear it there better?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It just keeps kind of falling away from my face. But so if you have those people, which you would talk kind of in the indie crowd, they're interested in mechanics, rule sets, and that sort of stuff. But I think, I don't know how many people are out there that do that. And it's obviously a more of a niche crowd. And then you have what Chris called it, followers, people who always follow. And that may go up and down, but you're always going to have friends. You're going to have people you meet at. I know you met several people at like a convention, for example, that are interested in following it. But with the setting and stuff, you don't have any built-in fan base already, right? It's all new. So it's not like an established IP thing. I know I always talk to my brother about, since he's in video games, and that was always the hardest about creating any new video game, was if it's a new IP, it's really hard. Because people were interested. There's always those gamers, even on the computer side, who are interested in the mechanics of the game. But still, the setting, the images, those are always big sellers, right?
Yep.
So for people without an established IP, it's so like the amount of money they had to put in. In fact, the companies who do very well put in a lot of money to build the IP before you even market the product. Obviously, you're not gonna do that, right? So I don't know. I mean, I guess one thing about the Kickstarter and I guess the physical nature of what you had there was, and I kind of agree with comments earlier, that images, right? Like the game is an action game. You're trying to portray that sort of wushu sort of action. I don't know if there's some way to like really bring that out. If you ever did it again, to bring out the action nature of it, instead of the more sort of static nature. I don't know how you do that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think that's a really excellent point. And that was brought up by more than one person. My problem was that one of the things that I wanted from the art was portraits of each of the characters, which is what because that was cheapest, that was what I started paying for first, hoping that, believing that the Kickstarter would fund and that I would get this money back. So the first thing that I paid for was the 3 portraits, and then I did have one action scene, but I mean, I received that later in the Kickstarter. But I think it's absolutely right, and again, it was more. I wasn't. I mean, I'm not in marketing, number one, and I wasn't really thinking. And it makes total sense when people say all your pictures were really static, and this is supposed to be an action game. So I think, if to move forward, if were I to do this again, the art needs to be all action scenes.
Yeah, even with portraits, it can be done in a way where it's not that the character's there, but the character's doing something, and you can do things in a way to, describe the type of action that a character would be doing. So if you have a character that is much more of a rogue, hiding in the shadows and skulking and whatnot, that portrait could then be of that character rappelling upside down from a rope, about to grab some gold. There's always ways that you can find to do that still get across. Here's the characters that you'll be playing, and to give a sense of action that it's very dynamic.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned characters you'll be playing, because one of the comments was that it wasn't clear enough that there were character creation rules. So there were people that were turned off by the fact, like, oh, I only have 7 choices of characters to play, so I'm not really interested. And this goes to a larger point where it was pointed out a few times that I kind of fell down on both selling the game and setting, which has kind of been mentioned here. It wasn't really clear why this was something that was cool that people needed to get involved with. I almost, looking at it, it's almost like I assumed my enthusiasm would spread, although I didn't give people the reason for the enthusiasm that I had, which is knowing how the game works. And part of that was not being clear that, and also you can make your own characters. Again, not being in marketing, not really thinking, being excited about the game already, I was too focused on what I thought was cool without trying to figure out what others might find cool in it.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, I would back that up and say that one of the things that has helped me is when I kind of give people nuggets of content. It's kind of like little goodies over the course of the Kickstarter, and obviously some of those cost you money and some of them don't. One that you might have benefited from because it's free to you and because it's super visual is some playtest video, or at least playtest audio, because that if people are on the fence, then they can spend 5 or 10 minutes looking at the video and say, oh, this isn't exactly what I thought it was. Like maybe they'll figure out that there are character creation rules or whatever, but it also doesn't cost you any money.
It's interesting because I did add in, and I think part of the problem, anyways, I did add in playtest. I got a couple of backers to get in on a game, and we did it on Roll20 on Google Hangouts. Then I both used that video, but also the audio. But it was too long. I needed to cut it more because the combat example was like 30 minutes or 35 minutes or something like that, and the non-combat example was the same, and the full thing was like 2 hours, and a lot of people that were commenting. I'm sorry, Josh?
Oh, it's just that I guess I missed that.
But again, it came late, right? Like, I should have done that earlier. I could have got, like, this group I'm talking to right now. I could have corralled you guys together to do a game, again, like we're doing now on Google Hangouts Roll20, in preparation, that I could then use that originally. And also I could have cut much smaller, edited better, like 5-minute chunk of combat. Like, here's a 5-minute example of combat that most people could take the time to watch or listen to. But go ahead, Chris.
I was also kind of thinking back now. I wonder if maybe people were thinking it was more, like, I know you kept saying it's like Wuxia Egyptian, but looking at the art, it was really playing up the Egyptian side of it and less the frantic action side of it, just at a very surface level. And I wonder if maybe that was sort of turning people off. So instead of having, like, the cover was gorgeous, I don't think really anybody could counter that point, except maybe someone like King Tut doing a flying scissors kick or something like that on the cover would really have told the story of the game much more than just that static picture.
Now, mentioning covers is a good chance for me to bring in Rob Wakefield, who is also a co-host on Accidental Survivors and has been doing Amazing work, graphic design, layout, and covers for Sorcerer's Publishing. God damn it, it's like 6-7 years now. So thanks for joining us, Rob.
Yeah. It
Is
feels like
that
a lot
not a
longer than that
segue
for
or
some
what?
reason.
What's that, Todd?
I said, is that not a segue or what? Literally, at the moment we're talking about a cover, it's almost like, and now on the line.
But I do want to say that I would not change those covers for the worlds of the three that Rob provided. But you're absolutely right in that the Kickstarter needed more action-oriented artwork that would be included. I think I didn't hear anybody who wasn't really excited about the covers themselves. So boom, Rob, there you go. But there were some comments on Nefertiti Overdrive as a title. There were people that it turned them off because they thought it was cyberpunk and couldn't figure out how cyberpunk plugged into ancient Egyptian wuxia.
Yeah, I mean, until you explained what it was to me too, that was my initial impression as well. And for a lot of things, like especially if you're just hoping to pick up random passers, all you've got is a title and a picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's a good point, and the visuals because the title is it was a little vague. There needed to be something really quick and really snappy to drive home exactly what it is, and maybe that's not the cover, but something even the thumbnail of the video that's at the very top of the page could have been something like that to tell people right off the bat, right off the hop, what it is they're getting into and what it is they're looking at. And again, maybe Chris has got a good point. Maybe the name was not quite there yet.
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean, I love the name now, but it's one of these things. Nothing can be sacrosanct. When we're going back and looking at this again, if the name is not, let's be frank, I'm not an idiot. The name is not clear. I think it sounds cool, but that's neither here nor there. Like if I actually want to sell this, then I'm going to need to look at getting a title that broadcasts better what the game is. Another interesting, there were 2 or 3 people that were quite adamant about not using wuxia. They were very upset that I was using wuxia in reference to ancient Egypt. Number one, because it said it's more than just wire fu. So that's also. Sorry.
I was gonna say, what? It's more than just the martial arts. It's not kung fu Egypt. You're like China Egypt. Like that's it is a huge chunk of, I guess, heritage, or it's more than the martial arts.
Yep.
However, when you think, there's history and I can understand. I can kind of understand that point. I don't know if it'd be enough to get irate about it, but yeah.
But it was, in all fairness, it was an RPG.net discussion. So
Yeah, bingo.
And no, but I will say, I'm going to say this right now. That discussion, go and check it out. We'll have a link in the documents. There is the discussions are actually incredibly civil. I mean, yes, there was one individual use a derogatory term, whatever. The individual, I don't believe, was aiming it at me. Didn't mean to insult me. So it was an incredibly 12 pages of civil discourse on RPG.net. So
were you involved in the conversation or just passing by?
Nope. I was deeply involved in it. I was answering as many questions and responding as much as possible.
Yeah, he was PRing it, that's for sure.
Good
And I mean, that discussion was really just more so about the use of the word wuxia, and I think I very much agree with the point that you made on it, Fraser, is that you're using it more as a theme, as a shortcut to the theme, and that's really what it comes down to, because you really only have so much time to get someone's attention to snap their head around and take a look. And it's the same way when you mention fantasy for anything. Fantasy, I think, has, like any genre or any theme, has branched out enough that there are subgenres, but it's enough that if you are a fantasy fan, if you're a sci-fi fan, all you have to do is say sci-fi, and that person will turn their head. If it turns out it's only 20 years in the future, well, then it's up to them as to whether or not they want to stay the course. So I agree with using the term wuxia because I don't know what other one, would really work. You know, I mean, like to me, the term actually fit, and your reason for using it, you know, I think was pretty spot on.
And I think the target market that I was going to is more you, Todd, and the general RPG purchaser than someone that is immersed in the Chinese literary genre of wuxia.
Yeah.
And I mean, in North America, at least, among English-speaking North Americans and English-speaking or Western Europeans, the term wuxia now, in general parlance, has become like martial arts, wire fu. Not just martial arts, not like, because I don't think anyone would say a Bruce Lee movie is wuxia, but they're looking at like Matrix, right? Even though Matrix is not a wuxia movie, they'd be like, oh yeah, there was wuxia in the Matrix because there was that kind of action. So,
Yeah,
but I don't
and
think.
I was
Sorry,
going to
go
say,
ahead.
even then, the term that you use right in the very top underneath the video is cinematic wuxia action.
Yeah.
You know, so it's, I mean, a lot of the way that you phrase it, like I've just been reading the text that you have here for this, and a lot of the text I find is very spot on. And I'd also add that anyone who you were talking about, you know, or someone was mentioning about, you know, your regular followers might not have been enough to keep going with it. I would disagree with that to a point because you still got over $2,000. That's quite an accomplishment. You know,
Yeah,
$2,000 is still pretty good. It just shows that okay, it wasn't quite on the mark with that. And anyone who has read, you know, your blog, heard you talk, or any of this kind of stuff, would know that you are into this stuff hardcore. So I think that those people saw it enough in what they read about you and what they've heard on previous podcasts to know that this is something that you would be able to deliver on. So now it's a matter of just, you know, like what is it you need to do to reach the strangers who don't know your work? Because $2,360 worth of people knew your work enough to be confident enough to back it.
and there's a couple more things I want to get through that were problems. Then I actually want to talk about if there's a future for Nefertiti Overdrive and what it might be. A really interesting couple, 3 or 4 people, and I mean the discussion wasn't hundreds. I mean, so it's a statistically significant portion of the number of people that commented mentioned that the POD, the $17 print on demand for international backers, immediately turned them off. But there was one guy who basically said, listen, I don't even recall if there was a backer level where domestic backers would get books like just regular. As soon as I saw the print on demand coupon, I was out. And this creates a huge problem for me, and I have heard it before, but it's a paradox in that, well, okay, then I cannot service international backers for physical property. Like, I can't send them books, and this is the only way I can do it without really risking a major catastrophe. For Centurion, we have a guy in Belgium who still hasn't got his books, and we sent him 4. Now, I don't know if he's just saying he's not getting his books, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because we do know that mailing things from the United States to Europe or from Canada to Europe is problematic at best, especially if you're unable to track it. So really, when it comes down to it, it's like I don't want to turn my back on international pledges, but if this is gaining me negative publicity, or if there's a significant portion of people who are turning away from this because of that, then that's a huge problem. And finally, I think that it's been kind of mentioned here before, but I think I wasn't clear enough that why this wuxia action RPG set in ancient Egypt was both cool enough about the action and cool enough about Egypt. And I'm going to have to paraphrase, but there was a good comment saying, listen, I thought ancient Egypt was cool, I thought wuxia was cool, but you didn't sell me on this being the wuxia game for ancient Egypt. So again, it comes down to just selling it in the text somehow.
Well,
Yeah,
and that's something too. It's like when an editor comes back to you with, you know, any kind of comments about anything, and basically it's a matter of going back and rewriting it. You're not changing the plot. You're not necessarily changing the characters. You're basically changing it based on the notes you've been provided, and that's what this Kickstarter's now done. Is it's provided you with notes.
Yeah.
You know, rather than you going all, you know, full bore and just releasing this product, investing your money into it, and then finding out people are like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, this is, I mean, that's one of the beauties of Kickstarter is that even when something fails, you can still learn a lot from it and then
Yeah.
be able to adapt and move on. Like I know with the 66 RPG, they did Kickstarter when it was only available in the States, and it didn't pass the first time. But they took that information because Chris he's full tilt into his game, from beginning to end. And he took that information, and when it became Kickstarter UK, he was one of the very first RPGs that I can think of that was ready, and he was very successful and he was able to do it very quickly because he learned and he adapted and he adjusted.
Right.
So it's one of these things where it actually does happen quite a bit.
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
Which one was that? Which Kickstarter?
66 RPG.
Okay.
And it's an RPG that's totally card based. So he had an uphill battle as well because I think a lot of people at the time, you're starting to see it more and more now, but at the time a lot of people were like, really, just with playing cards? How do you do that? So he had a very big uphill battle too, and it definitely sounds like that's what you have with this one, Fraser. Is it's being able to make that sell to people. But I think it's something that's doable. It's just this particular approach. This approach too is very similar to Centurion, and I think that worked for Centurion because it was very historically accurate, and that was the point of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well,
thing you could. All you have to do is throw with Cthulhu or something. And it's a guaranteed sale, right? I'm being facetious, but
We just add miniatures.
reason why those work, or some sort of
zombies.
steampunk theme.
Zombies. Cthulhu zombie miniatures.
Yeah, miniatures. Just not even related.
Yeah, so I guess for me, like Wuja, it's not even a term that I'm familiar with as much, mostly because probably it's the pronunciation.
Probably.
But to me, I guess when I looked at it, no, actually, I have one question first. I'm trying to remember. I was trying to go back to the Kickstarter. Did you have a subtitle to your title?
Well, the title was Nefertiti Overdrive Ancient Egyptian Wuja.
Okay, so there was a sub. I was trying to find it to see that. Yeah, that might be confusing for some people. I could see what you guys were talking about. Because when you explained it to me, this in my head this was Egypt, like set in Egypt, but what you were applying the cinematic style of what you would see in the Wuja sort of genre, right?
Yep.
So you weren't necessarily seeing. That's sort of the confusion. Like, are you mixing Chinese culture and Egyptian culture? But I don't think that's what you were doing, right?
No.
This was the cinematic style. Unless somebody's really familiar with that. Yeah, I don't know. That's.
Well, I think I do think that I need to rethink the title, and I also think I need to rethink the subtitle. But the problem is I suck at titles. When I get one that I think works for me, I tend to hold on to it like a pit bull. But we'll definitely have to get into that. Now, the way forward, funding is an issue. The funding goal is an issue. But here's the thing. The options for moving forward are release it as it is now. What's written now with the art that I've already paid for, and just put it together as a PDF and maybe a POD and sell it. The other option is to attempt to crowdfund it again. But even if I decide to crowdfund it again, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be using Kickstarter. Because, and I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, it's either Patreon or Patreon or Patreon or... Anyways.
I think it's Patreon.
Patreon? Let's go with Patreon. But...
Patreon?
Patreon? Patreon. But that's also an option. And it would be different. Number one, you don't set the funding goal, right? And it would be coming out piecemeal. It would be coming out chapter by chapter, month by month. But that's an option as well. Now, Josh, I know you've had experience with it. How do you find Patreon?
I like it. It's good for some things and terrible for other things. Like you said, it's designed for things that are sort of piecemeal. Like, I think Epidaya Ravishal is what I consider a success. He's got a zine that he puts out, a few times a year, and he uses Patreon to fund it. So I think he's got something like $1,000 per issue. But he actually has a pretty good article somewhere. I think I saw it on Google Plus, explaining, what the site is good for and what it's not good for.
Yes.
And I think it would be somewhat problematic for a single project unless there's an easy way for you to release it piecemeal that you think people would actually want. I mean, if you just sent me one chapter of a role-playing book a month, it would be frustrating for me unless the first chapter gave me a simplified way to play the game and each following chapter kind of added to it, So I have I'm not saying you couldn't do it successfully that way. I'm just saying I have a hard time imagining how you would convince people to do that. Also, I think, at least for me, it's a lot easier to, a small Kickstarter is easier than Patreon, just because it takes a while for people to notice the Patreon campaign at this point.
One of the reasons that I'm thinking of Patreon is because I would like to get away from going back to Kickstarter every year and going through this, and it would also allow me at least to publish fiction as well. So now Nefertiti Overdrive was originally the kind of design. It didn't end up being anywhere close to it, but it was kind of inspired by Lady Blackbird, whereby there would be an adventure and some characters in a very simple system that could all just plop all together, and boom, off you go. It grew into something greater than that, but if I was going to go to Patreon as well, one of the things that I'd be doing is changing how I'm presenting Nefertiti Overdrive, or whatever it shall be called in the future. And again, I guess it's not either or. I could always try to kickstart Nefertiti Overdrive, and then from now on just do things that would fit into the Patreon model, especially if I want to attempt to crowdfund fiction as well as games. Anyone?
I would say, yeah. That's an interesting way of going at it. I know, because that's based on some of your previous blog posts. That's something that you've been kind of feeling, I guess, the word conflicted about.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it also sounds too is like it would be a completely different change of tone and purpose to the game in particular. So you're almost talking about just rewriting everything from scratch. So is that something that you really want? Do you really feel that this game needs to be rewritten, or the game itself is fine? Were you happy with what you created?
Now here's the thing. So if we do go to Kickstarter, and the funding goal has been mentioned a couple of times. I think that's absolutely correct. Now, for those people that are interested, targeting $5,000. You can expect, now it didn't happen to me in Centurion, but I've been warned about this, you can expect 10% of your pledges just not to be completed, so not going to be paid. And over and on top of that, although it's generally 7% of fees are paid to Kickstarter, it can run as high as 10. So when I asked for $5,000, that was on a budget of $4,000, which didn't actually pay for everything that I needed the money for. The art budget was $1,000. The cartography was $500. Graphic design was $700. Editing was $500. Printing, shipping, etc. was just over $1,800. So if 10% were uncleared payments, and then there was 10% of fees, I would actually be in the hole of $500. So if I'm going to do it, were I to retry this at Kickstarter, probably doing it at the same funding level as Centurion, which was $3,500. But to do that, I've got to cut things. Now, my printing, shipping budget had a lot in there for shipping failures. Cutting that buffer out is a huge risk, but again, it might have to be done. Going with fewer picks and literally no maps, I can lower my art budget to $750. And if it comes down to cutting either layout or editing, I'm honestly going to cut editing, and I don't want to do that. But I think that most RPG readers are more accepting of spelling mistakes and grammar errors than they are of books that look like crap. So I mean, if I cut out editing, lowered my art budget, got rid of maps entirely, which sucks, but again, I can get it down to $3,000. Which, with a 3,500 target with Centurion, it was $3,500. Well, actually, it was $5,000. But if I had hit based on the actual cash in hand, a $3,500 goal would get you $3,100 in your hand. Best case scenario. So
Well, you could always add in like maps and some of those things as
Stretch
bonus
goals.
levels too. Stretch
Yep.
goals. Another thing I've seen, and I don't know how practical it is on a mass sort of level, but a few people, sort of a newish thing, is what they're doing is they're buying the PDFs and then submitting them to Lulu for a personal print job. And because Lulu's throwing out coupons left, right, and center. Well, at least I get at least one a month, probably. And I don't even think I've ever used their service. But I've seen a few people now that are doing that. So they're downloading a PDF, sending it to Lulu, and getting Lulu to print it.
Okay.
And the one that sort of had a lot of traction for this was the Marvel Heroic for the Apocalypse book, since they went out. It's no longer in print, and a lot of people, well, I don't think it ever went into print, but the PDF was out, and so people that wanted print copies started submitting to Lulu. My point being that you could do just a PDF only and not worry about that. And
just cut the print, cut out $1,500 right there.
Yeah, make it a stretch goal.
Well, well, you could do a stretch goal, but you could just say, not even bother. Just do a PDF only, and just let people do it on their own.
Because that could get me down. That could get me down to $1,500. Well, to $1,500 actual budget.
Right.
Closer to what actually I had for Sword Noir.
And then, because the big thing is, if you let them do it on their own, you don't have to worry about any of worrying about misshipment or any of that.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're all their impetus.
Yeah. If that's the case, I just want to interject with something. You'd want to include just a little licensing thing in there, just to make sure to give people permission that they can print their own copy.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. There's been more than I think Evil Hat always does that. They've got the little statement in there: personal printing for personal use allowed.
Yeah.
I guess my question to that is, Fraser, is how much do you think, and based on Centurion or what you hope to do with this, how many, I guess, sales do you want or do you hope to get outside of the Kickstarter campaign for the product, right? And I know, because obviously with the PDF, you have the Kickstarter, and then you basically have wherever you're selling it now. What is it? RPG Now or somewhere now?
Yeah.
RPG Now. So that obviously limits any sort of brick and mortar store sales. That really depends if that's what you want to do or not. I guess that's why I'm asking.
Here's the thing. We have a distribution deal with Alliance. They haven't. I mean, Nefertiti Overdrive hasn't been finished, so they haven't agreed to that. But I mean, they stock Sword Noir and Centurion, so were I to make Nefertiti Overdrive, if I wanted to get into bricks and mortar, I could always see if they're interested, and they put in an order that I then can print and ship to. So yes, there is overhead on that, but it's pay in 60 days. So it's not like, it literally took more than 2 years to get the money back for Sword Noir, Noir to pay itself back, and Kiss My Axe still hasn't. So, if I'm worried about getting into print and getting into bricks and mortar, I do have that possibility through an existing distribution deal.
Yeah, I guess for me as somebody who's funding a Kickstarter, and if I really want a physical product, of course you can, if you're talking about venues by which the person can do it themselves. But there's a lot of people like me who are never going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If I want the physical product, I'm just going to buy the physical product, and I'm not going to be bothered. If I can, I just won't get it. But then knowing that it may be available elsewhere, then I'd probably just wait and get it there, to be honest.
Yep.
So I don't know. Of course, having had a record label and stuff, I know that anytime you do anything physical, books are like I did vinyl albums, and vinyl is like nailing bricks, right? And so and books are too. It's like if you ever move, you pick up a box of books. It's pricey, huge amount of mailing costs, and it gets become, and nobody buys from brick and mortar stores anymore. At least they don't buy albums anymore.
That's right.
Hence why I have a whole shelf of vinyl albums.
So if anybody wants vinyl,
Anybody wants to come over, I got a record label full of vinyl.
First, I'd have to get a record player.
Yeah, well, there you go.
But
I mean, like, I don't know. What does anybody have any opinions on me just putting together what I've got now and putting it out? Because that's going to be Sol's, layout. Well, Sol's beautiful layout that Kickstarter could fund and no editing. Not that would be any different than most of the PDFs that are being sold right now.
To me, that seems like yet another. This isn't really failure. It's you doing things this way rather than that way. So you may be to the point where you just want to be like, all right, let's finish this and move on to the next thing. I want to hurry up and do my fiction Patreon project. Like, yeah, you financially releasing as it is for a relatively cheap PDF will probably be the simplest solution for you. But if you want to do something fancier than that, I think that's what we've kind of been wrestling. Like, what would it be smart to do if you decide to do something fancier?
Yeah, and I mean, so just doing some back of the envelope numbers here, PDF only, I would need a $1,900 target versus $3,500. So that's a big difference.
Is that with cartography?
Nope.
Okay, because you could always do that as like a stretch.
Yep.
Like, I think that's the easiest part to add as a stretch goal.
Exactly, because that's $500. Yeah, $500 probably, depending on how many maps I want to add in. But the original budget was $500. So
it's Egypt. I can get maps on the internet.
there's some truth to that. I wonder where the psychological play is. Like, you have some Kickstarters that have huge numbers and never hit it. Other Kickstarters that have the huge numbers and blow past it. And then you have this middle ground. Like, if they see it's a low number, you're probably going to get a lot. You'll obviously get at least $2,000 probably again for it. You might even get a little bit more, because the people that, like, if they wanted it, they might want it a little bit more. So if you can give them a little bit more bang for their buck, you might get a little more buy-in if there's stretch goals that they can hit. But there's some people that'll look at a Kickstarter and see, this is not going to, they'll watch it. They don't jump on right away. They watch it towards the end, and if they see that there's no chance, they don't even bother. So if you have a lower limit and it gets hit quicker, there are those people that might just get on it because they know it's going to happen. I don't know.
yeah, the interesting thing is for Centurion and Nefertiti Overdrive, the vast majority, well, actually not so much for Nefertiti Overdrive, but a strong majority of Nefertiti Overdrive was physical. So there were 76 backers of the book versus 43 PDF only.
But the physical got you the PDF too, right? If I remember correctly.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you didn't offer that,
the hope is that those people would, yeah, but I'm sure we would be losing people.
You probably would, but if you don't have as high of a target,
yeah,
it's always going to be a numbers game, right? Unless you just get totally overwhelmed, and blow past your limits. If you're looking at, do I gain 10% of the people or lose 10% of the people, that doesn't matter if you're cutting your overall funding goal by, almost 40%.
Yep. Yeah, actually, if I go for PDF only, it's down to 40%. Yeah, around 40% of the original target.
Yeah, so if you lose a few people, it has no real impact there overall.
Now, here's a question for the Hive Mind. Let's say we go for PDF only, and then put my first stretch goal be maps, absolutely. But a second stretch goal could be a print run. Now then, so if you were in a Kickstarter for something PDF only, and there was a stretch goal for print, and the print got hit, and then they opened up a pledge level for print, I mean, is that how you would want it run, or how would you want that transition from PDF to print?
I think that seems like more work than you need to do. In my opinion, you could do something like it's always going to be PDF only, but as like a prestige backer level, you offer like for $50 you get a signed copy of the book, and maybe even limit that to like 20 copies or whatever, so that it's theoretically possible for someone to get it. But if you add like a geometric complexity late in your Kickstarter, I'm not saying you won't hit that stretch goal. I'm just saying that you're going to have a ton of work on the backside to figure out whether the math works.
No, that's a good point.
Because it's like, you really want international shipping to be part of your stretch goal calculation?
God, no. Never again. Never again.
A possibility might be too, because one thing I find a lot of Kickstarters are missing out on is the exclusivity. I think someone here just brought up the point too, is I'm just going to wait for it to come out in stores. What if there was even the possibility that only Kickstarter backers would have the option to be able to do a POD version? Because if you go PDF only, that means you'll be selling like the RPG Now Drive-Thru RPG. And they have a very good POD program that you could even set, like, they still would have to pay for it, but you wouldn't have to I don't know, it's to set it up in a way so that only they would be able to, get a POD, or they get a hell of a discount if they wanted to go that route.
Well, that's kind of what you tried, right, with the coupon for the RPG Now, or for the POD?
Yep.
But the reality is, if you're not selling a DRM PDF, people are going to buy it, and if you're not selling a DRM PDF, then anybody can take it and get it, like I said, take it, upload it to Lulu, and get it printed.
Yep.
So there's no way to control that. And I wouldn't try to control it.
No, absolutely not. No, if we go PDF only, there's definitely going to be the comment like print for personal use approved. But one of the things that was pointed out that I actually, I'm not sure why this is. Anyways, coupons are illegal as part of a Kickstarter reward. So technically, the offering of the POD is I would say it's a gray area. The individual that pointed this out said it's definitely not a gray area. That's a coupon. So another reason not to do it again. But again, like this, what I don't understand is that was part of the reward level that was accepted by Kickstarter as acceptable. So
I think Kickstarter is fairly loose until someone bitches about it, and then they crack down after the fact.
Yeah.
Like you look at Hero Quest when that was what they tried to launch basically a total ripoff of Hero Quest 3 times,
and
it got pulled eventually each time because it was a blatant copyright infringement. But Kickstarter didn't really care until there was pretty much massive complaints.
Yeah.
So if no one complains and it's not super obvious, they pretty much let it slide. Like, you're not trying to sell children or something like that as a reward level.
Yet.
Well, that's the problem with Kickstarter, right? You have multiple countries crossing multiple national borders, all with different IP laws, right?
Right.
And you can't sell children.
And most.
Sorry, did you say you can't sell to children?
No, you can't sell
children. Oh, okay.
Because I was going to use that as a stretch goal. I was going to use Chris's children. I'm not saying which Chris. I'm just going to say.
You can have them. Like a friend of mine. No, I think someone just raised the. I guess being somebody who I haven't bought a lot, but when I do, because I'm kind of picky, is again, if I see something almost funny and I'm not quite sure, I know it and I think it's gonna fun, I'll often just wait and just say I'll just pick it up. And the reason I do that is because I don't want to have to pay for international shipping. Well, in international mean usually U.S. to Canada.
Yeah.
So I'll just hold off on it, right? There's some ways there has to be a reason for me to buy it. I guess through like on Kickstarter, and sometimes one of the things I do buy is PDFs. That's because I usually don't go on RPG Now on those sites, so or I'm not sure if they're ever going to make it there. I imagine they will, but I just never really think about it. I just get the PDF because I don't have to pay for anything and it's cheap.
Right.
I prefer the physical copy for sure. I think a lot of people do, but I'm not going to double the cost for a book. I'm not paying $35 for a $15 book.
Right.
No matter how much I love you, Fraser.
Shipping is definitely for me on most Kickstarters the deal killer right there.
Mm-hmm. No, agreed.
Especially like to Chris's point, $10 shipping on a $50 product is different than $10 shipping on a $15 product.
Yeah, absolutely. Which
you can kind of avoid that with PDF, but then you have other challenges, right? Because like you mentioned,
sure.
You have all those people who want to buy PDF, but now the people who are buying the physical product, who are paying whatever it was, $20, are now going to spend the $7 for the PDF,
right?
$10 for the PDF. So you're not going to, you know what I mean? When it comes down to how much money you're going to get from the people who already backed it, if everybody came back to back it, but now the people who are purchasing a physical product are now just purchasing a PDF, you could expect a lower,
right, but
more amount of money
overall,
because of that.
Because overall costs are lower, so that should come out in the wash.
Yeah, then you have to draw in more people, and I think that goes back to our initial conversation, right? How to bring in those extra people, I guess, extra backers.
Yeah, like we were at 130 backers, so if each of them backed for a PDF, it wouldn't fund. So, I mean, that becomes a question. I mean, I like Josh's idea of having a limited number of physical copies available at a kind of premium price that would be signed, whatever. But even that isn't going to push it over. The one thing that Nefertiti Overdrive didn't have that Centurion had was a $600 pledge level for a helmet.
Yeah. You could ship someone a mummy.
I could try. I don't know if it would make it over state lines, let alone international borders, but
you could promise to make them a mummy.
I could promise that after you die, I will have you embalmed.
You could just ship them a make-your-own-mummy kit.
That's right.
Like $5 worth of gauze and some instructions.
Some nitrate and
tools to pull their own brain through their nose.
Yeah, well, with like a warning. You'd have to have a warning, a disclaimer.
The good point is that after they pulled their brain out through their nose, they would be in no position to complain about the shoddy workmanship of the book. So
that's true. That's true.
It'd be awesome.
Well, here's the question then: for all of you guys that are doing sort of RPG-related Kickstarters or have purchased a number of them, what kind of sort of stretch goals are you looking at? I mean, I've seen dice. I've seen mostly what I've seen is added content.
You mean like pledge levels or
adventures? That's for like not necessarily higher pledge. Well, actually, that's true. I'm talking about two different things here, aren't I? So I guess forget that about the dice because that's real. Well, no, actually, that could be both the stretch goal and a higher pledge level. But for higher pledge levels, what do you see? I guess is what I'm asking because.
Well, I think typically
I don't want a bookmark or.
Sure you do.
Well, yeah.
I think right now what the common theme is you'll have the PDF only for the core book. You'll have maybe another pledge level for like the PDF plus bonus material, whatever, like plus all stretch goals, blah, 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 whatever that level is. Then you might have the print core book only plus the core PDF. and then you'd have like maybe print plus all the bonus material in PDF, and then maybe at one more level where it's everything in print, which is sort of, and then the crazy stuff after that. But there has to be enough bonus content to make people want to go for, if your PDF is $7 and PDF plus bonus PDFs is $12, not a huge jump, but that extra level is going to have to correspond to how much extra content you're going to get.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of the point I'm getting at here for Fraser, for you, is that, I mean, I've seen a number of them recently, and this is something that'd be hard for you to do, right? Because they'll have, like Chris said, they'll have that, what I've seen is a PDF, but it's like, it's not a very good deal when you look at it. And obviously the people funding, they know they're going to fund way over, or they're pretty confident they're going to fund way over. So when you're buying a PDF for like a $20 PDF, you're thinking, oh, that's not very good for a small PDF. But you get all the stretch goals, the other, like everything that comes in PDF.
Yeah.
So if you do it, what they think they'll probably do over it, it becomes a good deal. And then if they keep going, you end up getting a really good deal. But these are ones where they figure they're going to have 4 core books and 5 settings books and some sort of bestiary and all this sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, like if you look at the Mutant Chronicles, that one went crazy with all the they had, I forget how many thousand pages they put out there for that, with all the bonus stuff.
The one thing that I'm going to adhere to is just that I'm not going to be offering anything at a pledge level above what I can provide myself. So there's not going to be any dice, there's not going to be any helmets, there's not going to be any T-shirts, and if that means it doesn't fund, it doesn't fund. Just because it's more problem than it's worth. The only one that might be of any use would be dice, and only if I could get really cool dice that had a kind of a significant impact on the game, something that instead of just one die having the symbol, like they would all need it or something, which again would then be priced so high that nobody would end up going to that pledge level. So,
well, oddly enough, there's another Kickstarter out right now that's all about doing your own custom dice, but they're only D6s, so that wouldn't really help.
Which is what we got for Centurion. I mean, it was kind of cool having the kind of ivory marvel dice with the D6 having the Centurion on it, but then by the same token, it's not that different. You know what I mean?
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think for you, because of like you're the one-man shop, I would stick to what, like you said, stick with what you can do and just do extra content if you can get guest writers doing. I think for Nefertiti Overdrive, a core book, obviously, maps, scenarios, things that build on it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, for bonus levels, pick up your previous products at a discount or maybe even at face value, because people tend not to do the math so much when they start going Kickstarter crazy. But there's, I don't know, or if there's partnerships with other, like with Josh and, Kickstart and throw in dolls or something, I'm not sure.
FYI, I'm not sewing any more dolls anytime soon. Oh my goodness, it was a good challenge, but yeah, I'll write you a thing for super cheap if you give me long enough, but no sewing machines for me.
That became a horror story, did it?
Yeah, a whole line of freaky-ass Egyptian ninja dolls or something, I don't know.
maybe mummies. I might be able to go that far.
Okay. Well, awesome. Thanks, everyone. This is really going to help me make a decision. If anybody wants to vote, you can do so. Or any last comments?
Perhaps kimchi. Some of your wife's kimchi is a bonus level.
Bring it to work, man. Some people love it.
Wow.
The only add-on then would be, besides the kimchi, I would go with that one. But besides that one, people already mentioned exclusivity of stuff. There's collectors out there, and I don't know, a different cover. I mean, there's always little things you can do as well, right? One thing I talked to my brother is there's always collectors. Having like probably a lot of people this thing, within this chat here, have been comic collectors now or in the past. I don't know how many covers I had of certain comics when I was like back in the day. I don't know. I mean, just different things. So I'm sure there's a lot of options that you can kind of mull over.
Mm-hmm.
Well, luckily, I mean, different covers is something that we can do because we've got 3 cool covers already. So,
Well, 2.
I actually consider the other one a variant, and it's different enough to me.
Oh, variant. There you go. There's the word.
Oh, variant
Variant.
covers. Variant
Choose your own
covers.
blood
Variant.
splat.
Choose your
I
own blood.
guess the other thing,
A blood splat in the shape of your face.
I like that.
one other thing would be to, and this sort of derails everything, is instead of doing a rule system, do the setting, put more into the setting, and then adapting it to like your games and I don't know, Savage World or other systems as well. That would be another thing that's maybe a little out of your realm, but that would be another way to tackle the whole project.
The biggest problem with that is I don't know enough. There's some systems that I do know enough that I could do that. One thing that was pointed out, some people said they were hoping for actual historical ancient Egypt, to which I replied, I'm actually not the guy to write that because my knowledge of Egypt is cursory. Sure, I've read history books about Egypt and I've listened to lectures and stuff, but my knowledge of Egypt is infinitesimal compared to my knowledge of Rome, and I still had to do a shit ton of research for Centurion. So for me to be happy producing a setting in that would be of use to the people that are interested in a historical Egypt one, it wouldn't be any fun. I mean, it would be a job, and I do that all day. So this is a hobby. I do this for the love of it. So I'm not going to do something that I don't find really cool. So yeah, that's.
But that could be something where instead of having other authors write additional adventures, you have other authors, who are experts into this, who can write this very easily, and get them on board to do it as stretch goals.
Yep.
So that you've got the very basic version of the game. For those of you who want to see something with a lot more emphasis on Egyptian history, bam, bring it to 5,000, and I'll bring this guy on board, and everything else like
or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then this way too, like within the same, book, whether or not it's print or PDF, you can start to provide options and details and make it, much more concrete without you having really to get into it. You can write the game that you are comfortable writing, that you want to write, but still be able to expand on it to reach a larger audience, which is the whole goal of, trying to do a Kickstarter. You're trying to get as many people as possible.
Any suggestions on a good ancient Egyptian expert in the RPG realm that would work for cheap? Anyone? No?
There's a professor at University of Toronto. Oh.
Plays RPGs, does he? Perfect.
The risk there, of course, is
I could make stuff up.
Thanks, Rob.
so you've got these like 3-sided pyramids, and there's a lot of water. A lot of water.
It's underground. It's underwater. Most of their civilization was submerged.
It was like they were on tripods and stilts. This huge pyramid on stilts because of the flooding of the Nile.
Well, it'd be an alternate history.
And that's why they were so good at kung fu flying, because they had to jump from building to building and treetop to treetop.
It totally works.
The risk, of course, is the more people you bring on, the harder it is to nail down a deadline.
Yep.
No, that's true. It makes things more difficult. I guess there's one more thing I'm going to add on here, is open up Pandora's box and mention the idea of, the video.
I think I have to do a better video, and I know that you have some skills in that area, or perhaps have access to equipment that may be of use.
Yep. And that's something that you're definitely going to have one way or the other. So, I mean, it's also something I think, and especially too because, I know in talking with you personally, that's not the kind of thing you're really too, keen and experienced on, everything like that. But it's something, how much work are you willing to put into that? Because that can be like, for me personally, putting work into the video was almost as rough as running the Kickstarter itself.
Yeah,
And-
exactly. Which
Yeah.
I don't want to go down that road, but I think I do need slightly, at least one with better audio. Let's say that.
Yeah, and once again, something that plays into the theme of it. So
Yeah,
you
like
know,
again,
no, go ahead.
Oh, I think we lost him.
well, I was just going to say
Oh no, there we
the
go.
video's a good
No
point.
such luck.
Because there's one thing, your Kickstarter was kind of like, all right, everybody knows me, buy this. That was sort of your pitch,
Yep.
which is good for people that have already backed it. If you want to reach new people, then to Todd's point, you need something that is going to give the information to the people who have no idea what it is that you've done in the past.
And you really don't have to do too much more because, like I said, you still got 2,300 people with what you've done so far.
Mhm.
Not quite halfway, but
Right.
$140 shy of halfway. So you literally just have to meet people the other 52% of the way. So it's not like all of a sudden your next video has to be, like you in a key going, wah, and just going crazy and trying to pull off stunts and stuff with a green
Although-
screen effect.
Although- let's
If you want to go the 152%,
Let's not say no to that.
okay. So leaving that on the
Hardcore,
table. However, if you don't want to
Yeah.
throw it your back, you can, just like augment it a little bit more, like you said, with music, with, however it is that you go about doing it, that can still be, you still want to have that part where you're looking at the camera and personally pleading, begging, and crying, give me money, please, make my dream come true. Because that's that human
Just like
touch, that human element. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go crazy far with it. I think that's the main point. Is that I think we're all trying to get across is that it's not about making these dramatic changes. It's just adding in that extra little bit here and there.
Yeah, tweaking it.
Yeah, because I think that's the key thing is that you still did actually quite well, and that's with people who were just like, "Whoa, Fraser wrote this? Yeah, I'm in." Or people who saw the Wuja part or any of these kind of things. So there is something there.
Yeah,
for sure.
The best way to approach the video, I think, is to have you in like a nice wood library sort of scene in a high, like a wingback chair and a smoking jacket with a pipe. And you always want to start like you're doing something, and then you look up suddenly and you're like, "Oh, hi! Sorry, I didn't see you come in."
And then as you're walking along and talking, you just like karate chop people on the back of the neck.
Exactly.
Just
And then
throw it
the
in.
viewer realizes that, and the viewer realizes he's again not wearing any pants.
When I do a high kick, that's when they figure it out.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
did not see that coming.
Because you can make the video goofy too. You know what? You could totally get away with it because that's the whole point. Having played it, this game is like the example that I gave about the chariot doing a 180-degree turn while going 60 miles an hour.
Right, but
Totally goofy and outrageous.
but to be honest, trying to
Going
do
60 miles an hour is
me doing a high kick on a video is not only going to kill me, it's not going to look that good.
Well, then if it's a pledge level, I'll back at that level. If it means you'll have to do a high kick on video.
What, killing Fraser is a stretch goal?
No, paralyzing him. Just paralyzing him.
Okay.
Oh, I'm totally backing at that level.
The paralysis level.
You got a Fraser and motherfucking Bullet going at it.
That would be
You
awesome.
gotta have like one of you's gotta have like dressed up Asian style, and the other one's gotta have the crazy Egyptian beard thing going on.
Yeah. Maybe a bonus
I'm
level.
not sure who's which.
Yeah, another version could be like an ancient Egyptian, like blaxploitation version of the game, and just start going through all these different cinematic genres as you go.
I'm not even going to touch that one. Not even close. All right, awesome. Well, thanks everyone for your input and your thoughts and your ideas. I think I'll definitely be moving forward with this, and I think I don't know, in our discussion today, I think it's clarified a lot of things. So probably will try to kickstart it again, but I'm going to have to run the numbers and just figure out what I want to do and what can be done. But thank you very much for your time, gentlemen.
No problem.
Right,
You're welcome.
Remember, Fraser, it's pajama day tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll be wearing my gi.
Pajama Day, the Department of what? Where do you
Department
work?
of National Defense.
National Defense.
Yep.
Pajama Day.
Pajama Day.
Pajama Thursday.
Day to nod.
And Friday is Adult Diaper Day. So
Oh, jeez, I hate to see Saturday.
Every day is adult diaper day, Fraser.
Well, when you're Fraser, every day is adult diaper.
Every day. Don't forget to bring your children to work day at the Department of Defense. That's a popular one.
it's a great one.
Just kids running around with jam on their fingers, touching everything.
Singing songs about not pressing the red button.
Pushing buttons and yeah.
Launching things, dropping things. All right. Well, gentlemen,
Blurring on.
thank you very much.
Thanks,
And,
Fraser.
this broadcast ends now.